Welcome and welcome back everybody, Tabletop Toki here, and in today's video I'll be going through my board game plays from July 2024. So to kick things off, I had 86 plays of 69 different games, 19 of which were new to me. The first game on here is A Nice Cuppa, a new game coming out from Button Shy Games. And if you're interested in checking out more on this, you can definitely check out the solo party video that I made about it. I also had a first play of Manhattan Project War Machine, which I also made a video of because it is such a delectable experience, both solo and multiplayer. Another new game that I got to try this month was Dungeons, Dice, and Danger, which is a roll and write game where you are exploring through different maps, trying to fight monsters while gaining treasure. I really enjoyed this one, although it does feel a bit limited in that you can only play with up to 4 players as per the box. However, I can see homeruling it so that you can play with more players. Essentially, the only change you would need to make is ensuring that multiple players can use the black die per round versus just one active player. And you could also use adjacency for bonuses of finishing certain items first, like killing monsters, etc. With this one, it does get a little bit more challenging with that because when you do defeat a monster, the other players get to deal 1 damage to them as a freebie. So that could cause some weird kinds of chain reactions based on how you're playing with that. But overall, it was a really cool game. I just wish there was a little bit more flexibility with the play count, especially since it is a roll and write. Shandagar is another game that I got to try out for the first time. And this one is surprisingly deep and thinky. Even though the rules are very straightforward, the multi-use cards add a lot to the game with movement points, unique scoring, and gaining buildings, which are your primary resource. I also love that it has a Mancala type of feel because as you move your architect to and from different streets, you can drop buildings along the way. So it's a really interesting take on pattern making and city building that I haven't quite seen before. I also had a first play of Things in Rings, which is a game where you have one person sorting the different items as kind of like the game master, and everybody else is trying to figure out what these 1 to 3 different categories are and correctly sort items and get rid of the cards in their hand. I love the concept of this game. I don't know if I was just tired, but in practice, I really did not enjoy it as much as I would have liked to. It did kind of remind me of a similar concept game called Visitor that's a little bit less abstract. And while Visitor does have more rules, I did find that playing the actual game and developing strategies tended to be a little bit more intuitive than in Things in Rings. So again, this had very easy rules, but at certain times it was really difficult to deduce what was happening, especially because the cards that you got were just random draw. So maybe having a draft of cards is more thinky than this sort of game would warrant, but I think it would have overall helped my experience a lot more to feel like I had some control over the cards that I got to test different theories about what the potential categories could have been. Not a first play, but I did get to play Goong again, which is just one of my favorite games with a bunch of little mini games. It's a somewhat hefty euro, and if you haven't played it yet, you absolutely should. The card play with selecting actions, getting bonuses, and managing all of your resources and different tracks throughout the game is just really well put together, and it's one that I am always glad to play. Another first play was Kelte, I believe it's pronounced. I'm not entirely sure, but I had seen some people post about this game and I wasn't super familiar with it before I did get to play. I liked some of the elements of the game again, but everything felt just slightly off. Managing your different workers for various actions was pretty cool, but there weren't any significant combos that I saw from myself or other players that really made me feel like, yeah, this is a satisfying turn or this is a satisfying game progression. Overall, all of the different actions did feel a lot more isolated than in something, for example, like Goong, where everything is really closely woven together and there are a lot of paths to victory. Kelte was a lot more pared down, but didn't necessarily feel streamlined, if that makes sense. So I'm glad I got to try this one, but I'm not sure that it will be one that I'm looking to add to my collection. Similar to Kelce, Evenfall is one that I'm not 100% sold on, although I did like it a little bit more. Essentially, you have a coven of witches and you are trying to get locations from your outer to your inner circle, as well as bind artifacts and increase your council and specialists. There are some interesting combos that you can set up with this game that feel really clever, but the one big drawback that I did find was the fact that cards are used as a resource and they are very plentiful. So the resource management in this one, all the ideas are really good, but drawing 5, 6 cards at the beginning of each round and even more cards throughout the game, each card has so much text on it, a lot of different things to consider. By and large, I found that in the game that we played, we were discarding a majority of them to gain resources throughout the game because you just can't play all of those cards. So it was a lot for a first play, and I'm not sure that I entirely loved that that was how the game played out. I feel like there might have been a better way to get slightly more resources and draft the cards so that you could still get cards that you wanted without having to just have a handful of cards at all time and discard them for resources kind of willy-nilly. A game that I did really enjoy more than I expected was Sea Dragons. This is a pattern making game where you're placing out your dragon pieces on a grid in Tetris-like shapes in order to claim areas and gain bonuses. It was super straightforward, easy to learn, easy to teach. Not to mention the art is absolutely gorgeous. So this was a sleeper hit for me. I didn't know much about it other than seeing the art in the title prior, but I'm really glad I got to play it and looking forward to getting a copy. Mechanica is an assembly line engine builder with little puzzly pieces. So essentially you're going to be purchasing different parts of your factory, moving your robots down them, shooting them through different channels, and eventually delivering them for money or to fulfill orders for points. I quite enjoyed this one. It ramps up quite a bit towards the end. I haven't gotten to try it solo, but I would just see how it is because it is very puzzly. And I think that the theme was really endearing. Robots in the rulebook at least have their little personalities, and it's just a very unique theme that works very well for this very mechanical engine builder. I did also get to play the White Castle again, and I am kicking myself because I'm wondering why I didn't immediately make a solo party video on this one. So I've talked about this in the past when I acquired the game earlier this year, end of last year, whichever one. But I am excited for the new Matcha expansion that will be coming out. So I'm hoping to get a full video out on this one sometime soon, either before or after the expansion arrives. Sky Towers is a little set collection game where you are building towers of different numbered cards trying to hit the value of 21. I liked the concept. I love the art. I think the implementation was a little bit lacking. All of the towers had unique abilities, but there were no player aids. It was just a grid of cards out. So I thought that was a little bit of a misstep with the production. And a lot of the powers were very take that. You also can block your opponents by playing certain number cards on the topmost right and left towers that you have, which didn't necessarily feel great because even if you weren't trying to specifically target someone, you could accidentally play a card that would completely block the next person from doing all of the things they wanted to do on their turn. For this light of a card game, it felt restrictive, but not in a good strategic way, more so in a kind of random way. Moving right along, another game I got to play for the first time is Diamonds, which as I understand it, is one of the first games that kind of tried to innovate on trick-taking, and it certainly showed its age, we'll say that. There is no trump suit, so it's just whoever plays the highest card of the lead suit wins the trick. Your bonus for playing a non-lead suit card is that you get to manipulate some of the diamonds around, but each time that really just has a swing of a maximum of 2 points, and certain cards like the diamonds, for example, are a much stronger suit than clubs, spades, and hearts. So it was interesting to see kind of where some of that innovation started, but it's not necessarily a game I ever want to play again. I also got to try Ready, Set, Bet for the first time. I hesitate to even talk about this one because it really didn't feel like a game. The idea of real-time betting, etc. was really exciting to me because I love real-time games. I was told by some people that this is an even better game than Long Shot the Dice game, which I unexpectedly really love. But unlike with Long Shot the Dice game, You have no agency over what's happening with the various horses. You're literally just a passive observer watching and putting down your chips to bid as quickly as possible, which I did not find super satisfying. And although you as an audience member at an actual horse race would have no say in which horses would win and what have you, you would still be able to follow up with stats and things like that could inform your decisions versus just random die rolls. The only part of it that made it feel even remotely like a game was drafting a VIP power for the second, third, and fourth rounds. But even then, it felt like so little. And once the horses get to a certain point, or once you're out of chips, you literally just sit there for the rest of the round and wait for one horse to cross the finish line, which I felt to be extremely anticlimactic for this like real-time type of situation. So while I'm glad I got to experience it, I am not itching to ever play this one again necessarily. Speaking of trick-taking games, Vivo is a game about dogs singing in a choir, and each dog has such a cool little personality. It's an interesting trick-taking game because each round, the number of suits played is going to be dictated by a spotlight card, which has a solo, duo, trio, or quartet, and that tells you how many different tricks need to be represented by the end of the trick. If you can't play a card that fits into that, then you have to play them face down. The person with the winning card will get to take a spotlight, which is worth 2 points, and the lowest card will actually get to take one of the cards and score it for face values. So there were some interesting incentives in how this one played out. I had only ever seen in one other game dictate what suits you have to play so strictly, and I believe that's Potato Man. So to see that in combination with like a high card and low card benefit, and when you want to score the low card versus when you want to score a high card, this one I found to be super interesting. I am on the lookout for a copy because it is not an easy one to find, but you betcha that once I do, it's coming home with me. Taro versus Sweet Potato is for 2 players. It's a little tile-laying game, a little more puzzly than I anticipated. One of the really cool things is that the type of piece that you place down dictates the zone that your opponent can place a tile in next. So it felt very abstract. The tiles had 2 sides that they could flip on, so there was some management with when you pull certain tiles back and place them out and score them. And then there was also that management of the boards themselves and how they arrange, because you can manipulate them using certain tiles and special powers. I found this one to be really endearing and really enjoyable. Mephisto, the card game, was another game with multi-use cards. I found it to be an interesting concept, and I do love multi-use cards. I think my main gripe with this one was that it felt like it went on way too long for a short, light card game. But overall, cool idea, but the implementation could probably use a little bit of tweaking for the game length. Gloomhaven Buttons and Bugs was another one that I finally got to the table. I really liked how this pared down a lot of the things that were in Gloomhaven into a very concise, short solo experience. This is definitely my preference versus setting up multiple tiles and multiple enemies. So using a lot of that and abstracting it into a couple cubes and 1 card with a card and some different trackers to show the unique abilities of the different heroes and enemies that you face was really satisfying. I would definitely recommend this one if you're looking for a chunky, big, epic feeling experience, but in a tiny, tiny little box. Seaside is a new game that just came out fairly recently. It's a bag with some wooden tokens in it, and the idea is that you can play it anywhere and everywhere, which is certainly true. For being a light little set collection game, I found it to be very endearing in the presentation, but the actual mechanics of how you get certain sets of things did feel a little bit random with the token draw from the bag. There were some cool combos that you could set up, like picking up tiles from the middle, using different types of symbols and tokens. Overall, I don't necessarily think it's one I need in my collection, but I do appreciate the presentation and the versatility of being able to play it just about anywhere. Feed and Breed is another game that I got to try and is currently up on the Game Crafter. So this is a game, push your luck game, where you're trying to get carrots to get as many bunnies as possible while avoiding foxes. I obviously really enjoy the theme and it is very concise. However, I found that the push your luck element didn't feel super satisfying, since all of the decisions about growing your bunnies and then adding more foxes to the deck are fairly automated. In addition, there's a tracker for your food each round, which felt kind of arbitrary because you're essentially just busting and getting the first card of food, which you can clearly like set aside or just log right away on your bunny track. And the food doesn't carry over from round to round. So like, I'm not exactly sure why that was there. It felt like an extra unnecessary step. And I, by and large, just left that part out and just did the push your luck and then adjusted my bunnies on the go. You don't necessarily need to take all the food, so I guess there might be a decision there with limiting the number of foxes that are then put into the deck, but overall I think the big draw for this one is probably the theme and not so much the mechanics. And continuing on, I was pretty surprised by 800-pound gorilla. This is a speed game where you have a sea of gorillas set out, a couple coconuts and bananas, you flick a spinner, and based on what happens, you either have to grab the smallest, medium, or largest gorilla, or the banana or coconut and say a phrase or do an action. It was a bit challenging sometimes to see who grabbed certain items first or last, or made noises first or last, but I did really like the idea of you have all these different gorillas that you're trying to assess the size of on the go, and they all have different backgrounds and patterns, so there's some optical illusions kind of going on. And once everybody has a gorilla, you flip them over and compare the weight of each one. So I found this to be way more fun than it had any right to be. I'm really glad I got to try it out. We had some other smaller games to end things off, but overall a pretty interesting month of some new games, some hits, some misses, but that's just kind of how it goes. Definitely glad that I got to try such a wide variety of games this month. Let me know in the comments down below what you've been playing recently and if there's anything you're looking forward to trying in August. Before we go, I did want to say a huge shout out to our channel members. If you're interested in supporting the channel a little bit more, we have memberships starting as low as 99 cents per month, where you can see videos a day early without mid-roll ads and all sorts of little goodies. Thank you so much as always for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Bye.